Have you ever been judged before you even opened your mouth? That split second when someone looks at you and decides who you are, where you belong, what you're worth. Now, imagine this. You're a black CEO, calm, confident, carrying the weight of your company, your people, your dreams. You walk into the airport just like anyone else, ticket in hand, heart full of plans. But then, a gate agent looks you up and down and says, "Economy lines that way." No questions, no kindness, just assumption. In that moment, what would you do? Would you fight back? Shout, demand respect? Or would you let silence speak for you? Because that's what Dr. Amara Lewis did. She didn't argue. She didn't explain who she was. She made one silent gesture, and it changed everything. A canceled flight, a viral moment, a nation forced to look at itself in the mirror. But here's the real question. Was it really about a flight, or about how we choose to see each other? And if you were her standing there, alone, what would you have done? Stay with me, because what happened next will make you rethink what power really sounds like. Like, share, and subscribe, and let's step together into the silence that changed the world. The first light of Chicago crept through the high glass of O'Hare International Airport. It washed the concourse in a pale amber hue, turning the long polished floors into rivers of gold. The intercom hummed with the same old voice, announcing flights to Dallas, Denver, and then Tokyo. Dr. Amara Lewis stood quietly near Gate B12, a small carry-on beside her, fingers wrapped around a paper cup that had long gone cold. She wasn't looking at her phone. She never did when she traveled. Mornings like this were her time to think, to breathe before the storm. At 44, Amara had built Synsense Technologies from a two-person garage lab into a global innovator in neuro-responsive systems technology that could translate brain signals into touch and movement. Her company's devices now help stroke patients regain sensation, and even allowed surgeons to operate remotely through haptic feedback gloves. Today's flight to Tokyo wasn't just another business trip. It was the signing of a historic $300 million partnership with Neuralink Global, the deal that would open access to Asia's medical networks. It was the kind of milestone her late mother used to dream about. She looked at her reflection in the wide terminal window. The sharp lines of her gray suit mirrored a quiet power. Her hair, coiled neatly, framed eyes that had seen too many boardrooms where her presence had to prove itself before her ideas did. And yet, she smiled softly. Her assistant once said she smiled the way people hold a secret, not because they have to, but because they choose peace over pride. A man across the seating area recognized her from a Forbes article. He whispered to his colleague, "That's Dr. Amara Lewis, the woman changing how we feel technology." She caught the whisper, gave a polite nod. There was still awe. Still surprise when people realized a black woman stood behind a billion-dollar innovation. From the loudspeaker came the familiar cue, Aerostar Flight 7018 to Tokyo Narita is now boarding first class and Diamond members only. Amara gathered her things. The wheels of her carry-on rolled with a steady rhythm, tapping against the tiles as she approached the gate. The line was short. 3 business travelers in tailored suits, a couple holding hands, and her. Behind them stretched the long, restless queue for economy families with strollers, students clutching passports, a world packed in patience. That was when she felt it, the stare, a pair of eyes tracing her from head to toe, stopping at the sleek passport in her hand. The gate agent, Janet Harlow, looked up from her scanner. She was in her early 50s, silver blonde hair pinned tight, her lips pressed into a habitual line that had forgotten how to curve upward. Janet's voice carried the kind of firmness that often hides unease behind procedure. "Ma'am," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the right, "economy line starts over there." The words landed softly, almost polite, but weighted with something colder than misunderstanding. For a second, Amara thought she misheard. She glanced at the first-class sign hanging just above her shoulder. "I'm in the right line," she said, calm but steady. Janet blinked, impatient. "This line's for first class only." The people behind Amar fell silent. A businessman coughed. A young woman lowered her eyes. Someone at the back of the queue whispered, "Oh no," and lifted a phone, subtle but recording. Amara offered her boarding pass. "Seat 2A, she said, gently. "Tokyo Narita." Janet didn't look right away. She sighed, took the pass, and held it up as if the barcode itself might confess an error. Her fingers hesitated over the scanner. The small red light blinked twice before turning green, approved. Janet handed it back without meeting her eyes. "System's been glitchy all morning," she murmured. A long silence stretched between them. Amara could have replied with logic, with authority, with the resume that would have shut down the moment, but she didn't. Instead, she simply nodded, the faintest tilt of her head. It wasn't surrender. It was acknowledgement of how familiar this pattern was. Her chest tightened for a moment. The air smelled faintly of coffee and jet fuel. In her mind, she heard her mother again, the voice she carried like a compass. "You don't have to raise your voice to prove your worth. Baby, the world will do enough shouting for you." Amara exhaled, slow and quiet, a choice unfolded in that breath to react or to respond. She chose the latter. She stepped aside from the line, letting another passenger pass. Her team engineers, analysts, communications staff watched from the seating area a few yards away. They saw her expression and immediately knew something wasn't right. "Is everything okay?" "Dr. Lewis?" asked Marcus Yen, her operations director, rising halfway from his seat. Amara turned slightly, her smile almost invisible. "Everything's fine," she said. "Sometimes the universe just offers a reminder." Marcus looked puzzled. "Do you want me to talk to them?" She shook her head. "No, let's not give it energy." Behind her, Janet called the next passenger with a bright, professional tone, as if nothing awkward had happened at all. But the line felt heavier now, an invisible tension folding over everyone. Amara glanced at her watch. 8:12. Mem? Boarding still open for another 10 minutes. She could simply take her seat. Forget this. After all, she had weathered worse storms than this small drizzle of ignorance. And yet, deep down, something ached. Not anger, disappointment. Disappointment that after all these years, the uniform changed, the technology advanced, the world celebrated progress, and still, dignity had to show its ticket at the gate. She walked to the large window by the waiting area, where the airplane's silver body gleamed under sunlight. Her reflection merged with the aircraft's wingwoman and machine, progress and fragility, all in one frame. She sipped what was left of her cold coffee. It tasted like the mornings of her youth, bittersweet. Steady. A voice inside whispered, "Let it go." Another, quieter still, replied, "No. Let it mean something." The hum of the terminal seemed to pause. The announcement for another flight echoed faintly in the distance. A little girl nearby pointed at the plane and said, "Mama, I want to fly like that someday." Amara smiled, her eyes softening. "You will," she whispered under her breath. Though the child couldn't hear, the thought gave her calm. She reached for her phone. Scrolling through the agenda for Tokyo presentation slides, investor dinner, media schedule, everything looked perfect, everything controlled, and yet the morning had just reminded her that control was sometimes an illusion. Her assistant messaged car service in Tokyo confirmed, "Dr. Lewis." She typed back, "Thank you. Boarding shortly." But she didn't move. Her fingers hovered above the screen, then drifted to the Synsense Ops chat, a private channel for executive-level coordination. She didn't type anything yet, just watched the blinking cursor. It blinked like a heartbeat. There are moments, she thought, when silence isn't avoidance. It's a decision. The PA voice returned final call for Aerostar Flight 718 to Tokyo Narita First Class, and priority passengers please proceed to the gate. Janet's tone over the microphone was as composed as ever. Passengers hurried. The queue moved forward, and the hum of engines outside filled the air. Amara slipped the phone back into her jacket pocket, her expression serene, unreadable. Whatever she would choose next, it would not be loud. It never was. The line at Gate B12 moved like slow water. Each step forward came with the dull rhythm of rolling suitcases, shoes brushing against tile, the quiet chorus of travel. Beyond the large window, rain began to smear the glass thin, silver streaks cutting across the sunrise. "Doctor." Amara Lewis waited a few feet from the gate. She still hadn't boarded. Her team lingered in the background, unsure whether to follow or keep their distance. They knew that when she went silent, something was happening beneath that calm surface, a decision forming, measured and precise. Janet Harlow, the gate agent, continued scanning tickets with mechanical precision. Her tone was polite now, almost rehearsed. "Good morning, sir. Thank you for flying Aerostar." Each passenger passed quickly, heads down, eager to get on the plane and away from whatever uncomfortable air had filled the space minutes earlier. But for Amara, the moment hadn't passed. It was still hanging there, invisible but heavy. She could feel it pressing behind her ribs, the small injustice that carried the weight of 1,000 others. She took a slow breath, letting her eyes follow the stream of people entering the jet bridge. Their movements blurred together, business travelers, honeymooners, families. For them, this was just another morning. For her, it was a mirror of something she'd seen her whole life, the quiet, familiar disbelief that someone like her could belong where she stood. She looked down at her boarding pass, Seat 2A, printed clearly in bold. Yet somehow, to one person, it wasn't enough proof. Marcus Yen stepped closer, his voice low. "Dr. Lewis, do you want me to file a report, HR, customer service, corporate, whatever you say?" Amara turned to him with a faint smile. "Marcus, tell me something. If I react right now, what happens?" He paused. "They'll apologize, maybe issue a statement. And tomorrow," she asked. He hesitated. "Tomorrow, someone else goes through the same thing." She nodded slowly. "Exactly." Her gaze drifted back to the gate. The way Janet stood shoulders tight, eyes fixed anywhere but Amara's, told a longer story than any apology could. A story about habit, about blindness, about the walls people build without realizing they've built them. The intercom crackled again. "Final boarding for Flight 718 to Tokyo Narita. All remaining passengers, please proceed to the gate." Janet looked up, scanning the room. Her eyes met Amara's for the briefest moment, a flash of discomfort, then quick avoidance. "Last call for first class," she repeated. The room quieted. Even the noise of wheels seemed to dim. Amara took one step forward, then another. The click of her heels echoed softly. She stopped in front of the counter. Janet's hands hovered above the scanner, unsure of what to do. "Dr. Lewis." Janet began, trying for a neutral tone. "You're welcome to board now." Amara's voice was calm, almost tender. "Thank you." She handed over the boarding pass again. Janet's fingers trembled slightly as she took it. The scanner beeped green once more. "All set," Janet said, forcing a polite smile. Amara didn't move right away. She just looked at her, not with anger, not with superiority, but with a kind of steady clarity that made Janet blink. "It's never about the ticket," Amara said quietly. "It's about how you see the person holding it." Janet opened her mouth but found no words. Amara took back her boarding pass, turned away, and walked toward the waiting area instead of the jet bridge. Marcus followed, his steps uncertain. "Ma'am, boarding is that way," Janet called after her, confusion creeping into her voice. Amara stopped, turned slightly. "Not today," she said. "We'll take a different flight." The word spread through the terminal like a soft thunder. Marcus blinked. "Wait, you're not boarding." Amara shook her head. Her hand moved to her pocket, pulling out her phone. Her thumb hovered above the Synsense ops chat. "Protocol Phoenix," she whispered under her breath. Marcus's eyes widened. "You mean she nodded once?" "Yes, all 30 of us." He froze for a moment, then exhaled sharply. "All right. I'll start the withdrawal procedure." Within seconds, his phone buzzed. He began typing, sending coded messages to the team scattered around the terminal. Engineers, analysts, logistics staff. They all received the same instruction. Abort commercial flight. Stand down and regroup at extraction point. Bravo. The hum of whispers started to rise. Passengers noticed. A woman turned to her husband. "Is that the Synsense team? They're all leaving." The husband frowned. "That's the CEO. I saw her on Bloomberg last week." Janet stared as the group of 30 professionals stood, gathered their belongings, and began walking out of the seating area calm, organized, silent, no shouting, no commotion. Just quiet authority. Amara walked at the front, her steps measured, her face unreadable. Each click of her heel sounded like a gavel in an unseen courtroom. A man nearby muttered. "What's happening?" Another replied. "I think the airline just lost a contract." Janet called after her again, voice trembling now. "Ma'am, wait. There must be some misunderstanding." Amara stopped but didn't turn around. Her voice was soft, carried by the air like a calm wave. "There's no misunderstanding, just consequence." Janet stood frozen, watching the group disappear down the concourse, a quiet storm leaving her behind. Robert Hill, the terminal manager, rushed in moments later, out of breath. "What's going on here?" Janet stammered. She just left. The whole group. Said something about Protocol Phoenix. "I don't even know what that means." Robert looked down the hall where Amara had vanished. His face paled. "It means we just lost millions of dollars. Janet, maybe more." "Millions," she repeated, disbelief twisting her tone. He nodded grimly. "Synsense Technologies isn't just another client. They supply the AI for our flight safety systems. You just offended the woman who owns the tech that keeps our planes in the air." Janet's mouth went dry. "Oh my God." Robert rubbed his temples. "Get ready for calls. A lot of them." Meanwhile, Amara and her team stepped onto the moving walkway toward the exit. No one spoke. The air was thick with adrenaline and silence. Marcus finally broke it. "Dr. Lewis, are you sure about this? The Tokyo deal?" She cut him off gently. "Our integrity flies first. Marcus, the contract can wait. Respect cannot." He nodded, his respect for her deepening in the pause that followed. As they exited security, a teenage girl holding her phone whispered to a friend. She didn't yell or anything. She just walked away, like a boss. The friend grinned. That's power. Amara didn't hear them, but if she had, she might have smiled. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the hum of morning traffic. Their company shuttle was already waiting at the curb. She stepped inside, set her briefcase on her lap, and closed her eyes for a moment. Her assistant turned from the front seat. "Do we charter the Gulf Stream?" Ma'am Amara opened her eyes. The reflection of the city skyline danced in them. "Yes," she said quietly. "File the request and contact Tokyo HQ. Tell them the delay isn't technical, it's ethical." As the shuttle pulled away from the terminal, Amara glanced back once more at the glass facade of O'Hare. She could still see the faint reflection of the gate behind it. In that reflection, a woman in a Navy uniform stood motionless, her hand covering her mouth. Amara turned away, whispering to herself, "Let silence do the talking." The rain outside thickened into soft gray sheets. It blurred the terminal lights until they looked like small lanterns floating in fog. Inside the shuttle, no one spoke for a long time. There was nothing left to say. The rain outside O'Hare had turned steady by the time the Synsense shuttle merged onto the freeway. Drops streaked down the window beside Dr. Amara Lewis, splitting the reflections of passing cars into silver trails. Her phone vibrated quietly on the seat beside her, but she didn't reach for it yet. She was looking out at the skyline, where Chicago's tall buildings rose into the mist like distant watchtowers. Inside the shuttle, no one spoke. The sound of rain filled the silence, tapping a slow rhythm that matched the thoughts moving through Amara's mind. Every face in that van carried the same question. What happens now? But none of them dared to ask. Finally, Marcus Yen broke the silence. "Dr. Lewis, Tokyo HQ just confirmed your message. They've postponed the signing ceremony. The Japanese team wants to know what to tell the press." Amara blinked once, turning her attention from the window. Her voice was soft, calm, but every syllable carried weight. Tell them this was a matter of integrity. No further comment. Marcus nodded, typing as she spoke. He didn't need to ask what she meant. Everyone in that van understood what had happened back there. It wasn't just about a gate agent's words. It was about everything those words represented. The quiet expectation that even the most successful black woman had to keep proving she belonged. Amara leaned back in her seat. Her reflection in the window looked distant, almost like a version of herself from another lifetime. The girl from South Atlanta who studied by candlelight when the power went out. The woman who pitched her first product to investors who mistook her for the assistant. Every time, she'd smiled, pushed forward, built her empire one silent victory at a time. But today felt different. Today, silence didn't just protect her peace, it made a statement. Her phone buzzed again. A new notification appeared, an alert from Synsense Public Relations. A short message in bold letters. Viral video alert. Trending on X. Email SilentPower. She frowned slightly. "Play it," she said. Marcus tapped the screen. The video began shaky footage from a bystander's phone. It showed the moment she stepped out of the first-class line. The quiet grace in her movements. The look on Janet's face. The caption read, "A black CEO told to stand in the economy line." She said nothing. She just walked away, with 30 people behind her. The video had already hit 1 million views. Marcus looked nervous. "This is spreading fast. Journalists are tagging you. Hashtags are everywhere." SilentPower. Dr. Lewis. Synsense. Even Q Justice. In silence. Amara watched for a few seconds, then closed the phone. Let them talk. We don't chase noise. But this could explode, Marcus said carefully. The story's emotional. People are choosing sides already. Amara gave a faint smile. Then let them choose. The van turned onto the expressway ramp. She could see the airport shrinking behind them, a gray shape fading into rain. Somewhere inside that building, Janet Harlow was probably being questioned by her manager, trying to explain what had just happened. Amara didn't wish her harm. In fact, she felt a strange calm, not triumph, not anger, something closer to release. The driver's voice broke through her thoughts. Dr. Lewis, destination corporate HQ or private terminal. She hesitated. Head to HQ first. The rain had softened by the time they arrived at Synsense's downtown building, a tall structure of glass and steel. Inside, the energy was electric. Employees were already gathered around screens, watching the viral clip. Some looked shocked, others proud. The moment she entered, the room fell silent. Her executive assistant, Olivia, hurried over. Dr. Lewis, we've been monitoring social sentiment, 90% positive, but media requests are flooding in. CNN, Bloomberg, The Atlantic, everyone wants a statement. Amara walked past her desk and set her bag down. Prepare a response. Just 3 words. Olivia blinked. 3. Amara looked at her. Respect is earned. The assistant nodded slowly, typing the phrase into her tablet. The words looked simple, but they carried the quiet gravity Amara always led with. They weren't defensive. They weren't angry. They simply told the truth. Her office on the top floor was filled with soft natural light and the faint hum of servers from the lab below. On the wall hung a framed quote from her mother, "Dignity doesn't need volume." She'd placed it there years ago, after her first public setback, to remind herself that leadership wasn't about reacting, it was about guiding. Amara sat down, resting her hands on the desk. The world outside was already spinning fast, but in this room, time slowed. She picked up a photo from the shelf, her mother in a nurse's uniform, smiling beside a little girl holding a homemade science fair trophy. You were right, Mama, she whispered. Silence does have power. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus Aerostar PR just released a statement. They're investigating the incident and have suspended the employee. Amara read it twice, then set the phone aside. It was predictable, almost too easy. Companies always moved quickly when headlines threatened their image. But she wasn't interested in damage control. She wanted change that would last longer than a news cycle. She turned in her chair, facing the city skyline. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the streets glistening. The clouds were breaking apart, sunlight spilling through like forgiveness. A knock sounded at the door. Marcus entered quietly, a tablet in his hand. Dr. Lewis, you should see this. He played a news clip, a morning talk show segment. The hosts were discussing her video. Powerful moment. One said, no yelling, no confrontation, just calm leadership. Another added, it's more than leadership. It's a mirror. It's how we treat people who don't fit our assumptions. Amara watched in silence. Then she said softly, when they stop talking about me and start talking about the system, that's when we've done something right. Marcus nodded. You know they'll reach out soon. Aerostar's CEO, Gordon Hale. He won't let this sit. I expect he will, she said. And when he calls, I'll be ready. Her tone was steady, but inside, she felt something stirring, not revenge, but resolve. The moment had grown bigger than her. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about responsibility. She stood, walking toward the wide window. Her reflection merged again with the glass, the skyline, the world beyond. Sometimes leadership wasn't about speaking. It was about deciding when silence should end. For now, though, she let it linger, the quiet after the storm, the stillness before the next wave. The day would bring phone calls, headlines, and meetings filled with polished apologies. But this moment belonged to her, a breath of calm, a reminder that even the smallest gesture, when rooted in dignity, could ripple far beyond the moment it was made. Down below, in the street, people moved like threads in a giant tapestry. Somewhere among them, she knew there were girls who had watched that video young, ambitious, uncertain, and maybe, for the first time, saw themselves in power without having to shout for it. That thought warmed her more than any victory ever could. Amara closed her laptop and whispered to herself, "The story isn't over. It's just beginning." And as the sun broke fully through the clouds, lighting the office in gold, she finally allowed herself to smile. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall glass walls of the Synsense headquarters. The city of Chicago moved below, loud and unaware, while inside the 25th floor conference room the air felt still and electric. Dr. Amara Lewis entered without a word. She wore the same poise she always did, calm yet commanding. Every pair of eyes turned to her. The viral storm had grown overnight, and everyone in that room knew they were sitting inside a story much bigger than their company. Olivia Grant, her executive assistant, handed her a tablet. "You've been on every major network since dawn," she said. "Even international news. Japan, London, South Africa. They're calling this the SilentPower movement." Amara raised an eyebrow, half amused, half weary. Movements are born when someone else decides they've seen enough. I just walked away from a gate. "But you did it differently," Olivia said. "People are saying it's the calm that shook the system." The phrase lingered in the room. The calm that shook the system. Marcus Yen stepped forward with his usual efficiency. Aerostar reached out at 7 a.m. Their CEO, Gordon Hale, wants a call. They said it's urgent. Amara glanced at her watch. "Schedule it for 9. Marcus hesitated. "You sure you could let legal handle it?" She shook her head. "No. This conversation shouldn't be about lawyers. It should be about leadership." She turned to the large wall screen. "Before that call, I want the analytics team's report. What's the public sentiment? Who's talking? And what are they really saying?" A young analyst tapped the controls. The display filled with numbers and quotes. 92% positive engagement. Millions of views. Thousands of comments reading. This is what quiet strength looks like. And finally, someone held them accountable without saying a word. But below those praises were darker threads. Comments calling her dramatic, privileged, or manipulative. A storm within the storm. Amara studied it all carefully. "This is what change looks like," she said softly. "Never clean. Never easy." At exactly 9 o'clock, the screen flickered to life again. The Aerostar logo appeared, followed by the face of Gordon Hale. He was in his mid-50s, sharp suit, salt and pepper hair, the expression of a man used to controlling the narrative. But today, his tone carried a rare humility. "Dr. Lewis," he began, "thank you for taking the time. I want to personally apologize for what happened at O'Hare. That was unacceptable, and it does not reflect our company values." Amara listened quietly. Her team watched her, studying every breath. When he paused, she spoke. "Mr. Hale, I appreciate your words, but let's be honest. It does reflect your company values, just not the ones you want to advertise. He blinked, caught off guard. I assure you, we are taking this seriously. I'm sure you are, she replied evenly. But seriousness after humiliation is easy. Prevention is harder. Gordon cleared his throat. We've already suspended the employee. That's reaction, Amara said, not reflection. He looked uncomfortable. Then what would you suggest? She leaned slightly forward, voice calm and deliberate. You don't need a statement. You need a system. Train your staff to see people before they see titles. Build equity into your culture, not your press releases. For a moment, there was silence. Then Gordon nodded slowly. You're right. We failed to create that awareness. If you're willing, we'd like to work with Synsense to design a diversity intelligence framework for our airline. Not a one-time seminar, a real partnership. Marcus's eyes widened. This was unexpected. Amara held Gordon's gaze. A framework isn't enough. I want commitment. A yearly equity program for frontline staff. $10 million. Independent oversight. Transparency. Gordon hesitated, then said quietly, Done. The room went still. Olivia looked from Amara to the screen, disbelief on her face. Amara spoke again. One more thing. I don't want my name attached to it. This isn't about publicity. It's about accountability. Gordon exhaled. Understood. You have my word. When the call ended, the room remained silent for a few seconds. Then Marcus broke into a low laugh, shaking his head. You just turned an insult into a global reform. Amara smiled faintly. No, I just reminded them that respect isn't optional. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another headline. Aerostar announces partnership with Synsense to launch the Equal Skies initiative. The news was spreading faster than she could breathe. But for once, she didn't mind. The story had grown beyond her. It was a mirror now, held up to anyone who'd ever been told they were in the wrong line. Later that afternoon, she stepped out onto the rooftop terrace for air. The city glowed beneath her, steel and sunlight reflecting off the river. A cool breeze lifted the edges of her hair. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of distant sirens and car horns fade into something like music. Marcus joined her, a cup of coffee in hand. You realize you just made history, right? Amara chuckled softly. History's loud. I prefer impact. He looked at her, curious. Were you angry yesterday? She thought about it. No, just tired. Tired of explaining my existence in rooms that should already know why I belong. Marcus nodded. You handled it better than anyone could have. She smiled faintly. Grace is heavier than anger, but it lasts longer. They stood in silence for a while, watching the skyline shift colors as the sun began to drop. Down below, news vans were parked outside their building, reporters waiting for a glimpse or a quote. Inside, employees whispered about how their CEO had changed the world without raising her voice. That night, after everyone left, Amara stayed in her office alone. The lights of the city flickered below like a constellation. She turned her chair toward the window and opened her journal, a habit she'd kept since childhood. The pages were filled with sketches, notes, fragments of thought. She wrote slowly, the ink flowing steady. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, and the world still listens. I didn't walk away to prove a point. I walked away because silence, in the right moment, can sound like revolution. She closed the book and rested her head against the chair. Somewhere in the distance, a plane lifted off into the night sky, its lights cutting through the dark. She wondered if it was Flight 718, the one she was supposed to be on. A quiet smile crossed her lips. The world moved fast, but dignity never rushed. As she prepared to leave, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Marcus. Gordon Hale just posted a statement online. He thanked you publicly and said Aerostar will implement DEI programs across all international branches. It's already trending. Amara looked at the message for a moment, then turned off her phone. She didn't need to read it. Some victories didn't require confirmation. She picked up her coat, walked to the elevator, and pressed the ground floor button. The soft hum filled the silence as she descended. Her reflection in the mirrored wall looked composed, peaceful, the same woman who had once been told to stand somewhere else. When the doors opened, she stepped into the lobby where the security guard smiled and said, "Good evening, Dr. Lewis. You've had quite a day." She returned the smile. Every day's a lesson. Outside, the night air smelled like rain and possibility. She walked toward her car, the city lights stretching around her like small promises. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew this silence had spoken, and the world had finally heard. The following morning began with a quiet storm. Not the kind that rattles windows, but the kind that changes conversations across a nation. By sunrise, the story of Dr. Amara Lewis had become the most talked about headline in America. News anchors replayed the clip again and again. Her poised expression, the calm way she walked away, the silence that had carried more power than 1,000 angry words. Every frame had been analyzed, slowed down, dissected, admired. Commentators called it the most dignified protest of the decade. Inside the Synsense headquarters, the hum of excitement mixed with the tension of new responsibility. Amara arrived early, her steps quiet but sure. The lobby security guard greeted her with a proud smile. "Dr. Lewis, the whole country's talking about you. My wife cried watching that video last night." Amara smiled softly. "Tell her thank you. But tell her to save her tears for something better. There's more work to do." As she entered the executive floor, the walls seemed to buzz with energy. Employees stopped her in the hallway, not to ask for selfies or applause, but to say thank you, for showing them what strength could look like when it wasn't loud, for proving that dignity could still win in a noisy world. She thanked them, each one. But her mind was already turning toward what came next. Marcus was waiting in her office, sleeves rolled up, coffee in hand. His expression was half admiration, half exhaustion. "Dr. Lewis, I have the overnight analytics report. You might want to sit for this." She didn't. She preferred standing. "Go ahead." He tapped his tablet. 54 million views in less than 24 hours. SilentPower has been mentioned in over 100 countries. You've got endorsements from major figures, civil rights leaders, CEOs, even artists. Oprah quoted you this morning. Amara's eyebrow lifted. "She did," Marcus nodded, smiling. She said, "Silence doesn't mean surrender. Sometimes it means strategy. People are running with that." Amara exhaled slowly, processing the weight of it. "That's powerful, but fame isn't the goal." "I know," Marcus said, "but power listens to fame. It opens doors. Right now. You have both." He was right, and that realization carried a mix of pride and unease. The world loved stories of strength, but it often forgot the people living them. She didn't want to become a symbol. She wanted to become a catalyst. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Gordon Hale press conference at noon. "Need you there?" Amara glanced at Marcus. He wants me to stand beside him. You going? He asked. She hesitated. Yes, but not beside him. We'll stand for the same cause, just from different places. At noon, the press conference began inside Aerostar's downtown headquarters. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters lined up shoulder to shoulder, their microphones pointed toward the podium where Gordon Hale stood. His expression was serious but composed. Yesterday, he began, our airline failed to uphold the values we claim to live by. Dr. Lewis was treated with disrespect at one of our gates. That moment has forced us to confront something much larger than a single mistake. It's forced us to look at ourselves. Behind him, a new banner glowed on the screen, Equal Skies Initiative, the same program Amara had quietly demanded the day before. Gordon continued, effective immediately. Aerostar will invest $10 million annually in diversity and empathy training for all customer-facing staff worldwide. And we will be working directly with Synsense Technologies to create an AI-driven empathy module that helps our employees understand bias in real time. The crowd of reporters erupted with questions. Is Dr. Lewis here today? Has she accepted your apology? Will she make a statement? Gordon raised his hand for quiet. Dr. Lewis declined to stand here beside me because she believes this should not be about personalities. She believes it should be about progress. And I agree. Applause filled the room, hesitant at first, then steady. For the first time in his career, Gordon Hale wasn't defending a corporation. He was defending a principle. Across the city, Amara watched the live stream from her office. She sat in silence, hands folded, face unreadable. When Gordon finished speaking, she turned to Olivia, who stood nearby, holding her breath. Release our statement, Amara said. Olivia nodded and pressed send. Within seconds, the Synsense official account posted a simple message. Change begins when listening replaces defending. Today, the skies are a little more equal. The message went viral instantly. Thousands of comments poured in. Some thanked her, some argued, but most simply said one thing. Thank you for reminding us what quiet courage looks like. Later that day, Amara drove herself home for the first time in weeks. She lived just outside the city, in a neighborhood lined with old oak trees and small front porches. The rain from the night before had left the streets glistening. Kids played in puddles. A mailman waved as she pulled into her driveway. Inside, her house was peaceful. Shelves lined with books, soft jazz playing from a record player, the faint scent of cedar in the air. She slipped off her heels, placed her phone on silent, and sank into the couch. For the first time since the airport, she allowed herself to breathe fully, but silence wasn't always peace. Sometimes it was reflection. Her mind replayed the image of Janet Harlow, the stiff uniform, the guarded eyes, the small crack of fear when she realized who she had spoken to. Amara wondered if Janet had slept last night, if she had a family, if she felt regret. She didn't hate her. In fact, she pitied her because ignorance often wore the face of habit, not hatred. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, whispering to herself, "What now, Amara? What do you do after the world applauds you for something you wish had never happened?" Her phone buzzed again. This time, a message from her mentor, retired civil rights attorney Samuel Green. You can't control how the world uses your story. You can only decide what comes next. She smiled faintly. He always knew the right words. That evening, she opened her laptop and began drafting something new, an open letter to business leaders. Not a speech, a conversation. She titled it, "The Cost of Courtesy." In it, She wrote, "Every company invests in efficiency, but few invest in empathy. We celebrate innovation, yet ignore inclusion. The smallest moments of disrespect cost more than any operational delay. They cost trust. And once trust leaves the room, it rarely returns." When she finished, she read it aloud softly, testing how it would sound if read by a voice other than her own. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was hopeful. That was what she wanted most, for this story to end with hope, not outrage. As the night deepened, she stepped outside to her porch. The sky was clear now, stars sharp against the dark. A plane passed overhead, its lights blinking gently as it disappeared into the horizon. She wondered where it was headed. Maybe Tokyo. Maybe somewhere new. She thought about her mother again, about those long nights when they would sit by the window, listening to the distant sound of airplanes and dreaming of the day one of them would carry her to a better future. Her mother used to say, "Baby, the sky doesn't care what color you are. It only knows if you're ready to fly." Amara looked up, her heart softening. "I'm ready, Mama," she whispered. "But this time, I'm not flying alone." By the time Friday arrived, the entire country seemed to be living inside the same conversation. Talk shows, podcasts, and even late-night hosts mentioned her name. Some praised her restraint, others debated her motives. But no one could deny the impact of one silent choice. Inside the Synsense media room, a dozen monitors glowed with data dashboards. Hashtags danced across digital maps of the United States, spreading like light through a dark web. Amara stood in front of the largest screen, arms folded. Her reflection shimmered across the display, surrounded by numbers, graphs, and the endless hum of public opinion. Olivia Grant moved beside her, tablet in hand. "We've hit 70 million views. Dr. Lewis. That's across all platforms. Engagement's massive, but we're starting to see pushback." Amara didn't turn. "What kind commentators saying you're using this to promote Synsense? That it's a PR stunt?" Amara's lips curved faintly, not in amusement, but in recognition. When truth makes people uncomfortable, they call it a performance. Olivia nodded. "Still, should we respond?" "Not yet," Amara said quietly. "Let the noise exhaust itself." Marcus entered, his usual energy tempered by long hours and caffeine. "Dr. Lewis, we're seeing division online. Half the country calls you a role model. The other half says you overreacted. Reporters are camping outside the building. Let them stay in the rain," she said softly. "They'll dry eventually." He smiled at that. "You sound like your mother again." "Maybe I do," she admitted. She believes storms wash away what doesn't belong. They watched the live-feeded news coverage. On one screen, a young journalist spoke passionately about workplace discrimination. On another, a conservative host accused Amara of creating unnecessary drama. The contrast was almost poetic, two realities playing side by side, neither touching the other. "Truth is quiet," Amara said. "Opinion is loud." Marcus exhaled. "Quiet doesn't trend. Then we'll teach it how." Her words carried a calm authority that settled the room. For the next few hours, they worked on the next step, not another statement, but an initiative, something larger than hashtags, something that would outlive the attention span of the internet. When the meeting ended, Amara stepped out onto the balcony. Chicago stretched before her, a maze of steel and sky, the wind carrying the scent of rain and ambition. Her phone vibrated again. A message from an unknown number. "You don't know me, but my daughter watched your video. She said she wants to be like you when she grows up. Thank you." Amara closed her eyes. That single message felt louder than every headline combined. Across town, at Aerostar headquarters, Gordon Hale faced a different kind of storm. His boardroom was filled with executives arguing over losses, lawsuits, and logistics. Public trust was fragile. Bookings had dropped, and investors were uneasy. He sat quietly at the head of the table, listening. Finally, he raised his hand. Enough. We can replace money. We can't replace integrity. The only way forward is through the fire we started. The room fell silent. For the first time, Gordon understood what Amara meant when she said prevention was harder than reaction. He opened his laptop and began drafting a memo. All executives will attend equity training before year-end. No exceptions. Meanwhile, Amara spent the afternoon meeting with her engineers. Synsense wasn't just a tech company anymore. It was becoming a bridge. The team had already started developing a prototype AI empathy module for customer service training. It used emotion recognition and language modeling to teach awareness, helping staff sense bias before it surfaced. Marcus explained the design, his voice full of enthusiasm. It's like teaching machines to teach humans to be human again. Amara smiled. That's the goal, not to replace empathy, to remind people they still have it. As evening settled, Amara returned home. The media storm outside hadn't calmed, but inside her house, peace still lived. She poured tea, sat by the window, and opened her laptop. Emails filled her inbox, hundreds from strangers' mothers, students, retired pilots, young professionals. Each one told a story of a time they had been told they were in the wrong line. She read until her eyes grew tired. One email made her pause. It was from an Aerostar employee, anonymous. I was at O'Hare that morning. I saw what happened. I didn't speak up. I should have. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do better now. Amara leaned back, the glow from the screen reflecting in her eyes. She whispered, "That's all any of us can do." That night, she dreamed of her mother again. They were sitting by the window, the sky full of airplanes. Her mother looked at her and said, "Baby, don't fight storms. Learn how to fly above them." When Amara woke, the sun was just beginning to rise. The next day, Synsense launched the Empathy First initiative. The campaign video began with a single sentence in white letters on a black screen. One silent act can teach 1,000 lessons. It showed moments of people choosing compassion in small, everyday settings, a store clerk helping an elderly man, a teacher standing up for a student, a stranger offering a seat to someone tired. No narration, only soft piano music and a final line. The world changes when we choose to listen. Within hours, the video spread everywhere. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't corporate. It was human. And that was why it worked. In the afternoon, Amara sat in her office watching the responses roll in. One comment caught her eye. She's teaching us that silence isn't weakness, it's wisdom. She turned off the monitor and whispered to herself. Then they heard it right. That evening, Marcus entered her office. "Dr. Lewis, the FAA just called. They want to collaborate on using Synsense tech for training air traffic staff. This movement is turning into policy." Amara smiled softly. "Then let's make sure the policy remembers the people." He nodded. "You know, you've changed how people see leadership. You didn't raise your voice once." She looked out the window, where the last light of day painted the skyline in gold. Leadership isn't about volume, it's about vibration. You move the air differently, and people feel it. Outside, the world was still buzzing with her name, but in that office, silence reigned again. Not empty silence, but the kind that follows purpose. As the night deepened, Amara closed her laptop and whispered a short prayer for strength. Somewhere out there, she knew, someone was watching that viral clip not as entertainment, but as a reminder that dignity still matters. The storm online was far from over, but even storms must run out of rain. And when they do, what remains is clearer air. The glass conference room on the 32nd floor of Aerostar headquarters felt colder than usual that morning. The city skyline stretched endlessly outside, but no one dared look out. Every seat was filled with executives, lawyers, and PR advisors, their eyes fixed on the large digital screen at the far end of the room. On the screen, charts showed plunging numbers. Flight bookings down by 14% in 48 hours. Social sentiment down by 60%. It was the kind of data that made even billion-dollar companies nervous. Gordon Hale entered the room quietly, carrying only a notepad. No entourage, no assistant. Just a man who knew that leadership sometimes meant standing in the middle of a storm with nowhere to hide. He placed his coffee down and said simply, "Let's begin." The chief communications officer spoke first. "We've managed to contain some of the backlash, but the narrative still favors Dr. Lewis. The SilentPower movement has eclipsed our official response. People trust her more than us." Gordon nodded slowly. "They should. She earned that trust." A silence fell. No one expected him to say that. One of the board members, an older man named Charles Mercer, frowned. "With respect, Gordon, we can't run a company on guilt. She's a competitor now. We should focus on damage control, not partnership." Gordon leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. "Charles, you're thinking like this is 1980. This isn't about competition. It's about credibility. If we don't rebuild that, we'll have no company to control." Another executive chimed in. "But partnering with her gives her more influence. Investors might see that as a sign of weakness." Gordon set his coffee down and stood. "Let me tell you what weakness looks like. It looks like ignoring a problem until it goes viral. It looks like losing millions because one of our own couldn't see beyond the color of someone's skin. That's weakness." No one spoke after that. He turned toward the screen and clicked a remote. A new slide appeared, the Equal Skies Initiative timeline. This is our chance to do something real. The Empathy AI project goes live in 6 months. Dr. Lewis and her company will lead development. We don't need another PR campaign. We need transformation. Charles crossed his arms. "And what about the employee? The gate agent?" Gordon hesitated for a beat. "She's been terminated. But I've read her file. 20 years of service. She wasn't evil. She was uneducated about herself." He paused, his tone softening. "We can't fix prejudice with punishment. We fix it with understanding. Across town, at Synsense headquarters." Amara Lewis was preparing for a call with Gordon. She sat at her desk, a small bonsai tree beside her, a gift from her late mother. The room was filled with morning light. She adjusted her glasses, sipped her coffee, and waited. When Gordon's face appeared on the screen, he looked tired but resolved. "Dr. Lewis," he said, "we just finished an emergency board meeting. I wanted to tell you personally that we're fully committing to the initiative, not as an apology, but as a promise." Amara nodded. "Promises are good. Proof is better. You'll have both," he replied. "But there's something else. The gate agent, Janet Harlow. She was fired. As expected. I've read the report. Her son is sick, serious condition. She's struggling." Amara's eyes softened. "I see. I know it's not your responsibility," Gordon continued, "but I thought you should know." She nodded again, but her voice was distant. Thank you for telling me." After the call ended, she sat in silence. The faint hum of the air conditioner filled the room. For a long moment, she stared out at the city skyline. Janet Harlow, the woman who had told her to move to the economy line, was now unemployed. With a sick child, fate had a cruel sense of symmetry. That evening, she walked home from the office instead of taking her car. The streets were glowing with early evening light. Chicago smelled of rain again, and the wind brushed her face with cool fingers. As she walked, memories surfaced her first job interview, where the hiring manager told her she was surprisingly articulate. The investor who once asked if she'd be more relatable with a lighter hairstyle. The years of quiet endurance. But tonight, her thoughts weren't bitter. They were heavy, full of empathy, not anger. When she arrived home, she went straight to her desk and opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she began to type an email to her CFO allocate funds for a new Synsense Cares grant. Anonymous. Purpose medical and logistical support for a minor patient with neurodegenerative condition in Illinois. Partner with Chicago Children's Hospital. First beneficiary, Adam Harlow. She hit send. Then she leaned back and exhaled deeply. The next morning, the story reached the press again this time. Not about scandal, but about change. Aerostar and Synsense had officially announced their partnership, and social media buzzed with cautious optimism. At the same time, a small news outlet reported something unexpected, a charitable donation to a local hospital under an unnamed tech firm's foundation. The amount wasn't disclosed. The recipient wasn't named, but somehow the internet connected the dots. Later that afternoon, Amara's assistant entered her office, smiling faintly. "You've started something. Dr. Lewis. People online are calling it the second gesture." Amara chuckled softly. "I didn't start anything. I just refused to end it with hate." Meanwhile, at a small house in the suburbs, Janet Harlow sat on her couch, holding a letter from the hospital. It informed her that her son's treatment would now be fully covered by a private foundation grant. She read it twice, then a third time. Her hands trembled. When Adam came into the room, thin and pale, but smiling, she hugged him tightly. "Baby," she whispered, "some people you hurt, they forgive you anyway." He looked at her, confused. "Mom, are you crying?" She smiled through her tears. "No, sweetheart. I'm just grateful. That same night." Amara stood at her window again, looking out over the city lights. The reflection in the glass showed a woman who had carried both fire and grace and somehow managed to use both for good. Marcus called just as she was about to close her laptop. "Dr. Lewis, have you seen the news?" "I try not to," she replied gently. "Well, maybe you should. You're trending again, but this time for compassion." Amara laughed quietly. "Compassion isn't news, Marcus. It's just rare." Before ending the call, Marcus added, "You know, there's a saying in aviation, smooth skies never made skilled pilots." She smiled. "Then I guess we're all learning to fly." As the night deepened, Amara poured herself another cup of tea and watched the moon drift between clouds. Somewhere out there, an airline was rebuilding its culture. A woman was holding her child with hope again, and millions were still replaying that moment when silence changed everything. She whispered softly to the empty room, "Let them talk. Let them learn. Let the skies be equal." The city lights shimmered in reply. The world has a strange way of shifting when it's ready to hear the truth. For weeks, the story of Dr. Amara Lewis had dominated every corner of the internet. But now, something was changing. The noise had softened. The anger had quieted. What remained was reflection, and that, Amara thought, was how real transformation begins. It was a crisp Monday morning when she walked into Synsense headquarters. The sun poured through the glass lobby, catching the gleam of the metal letters on the wall, empathy and innovation. Employees smiled as she passed, some giving her quiet nods of gratitude. In the elevator, she stood alone for a moment, her reflection mirrored a dozen times over in the glass walls. She barely recognized the woman staring back, not because of fame, but because of what the past month had taught her. Silence, when rooted in conviction, can echo louder than speeches. When she reached her floor, Marcus was already waiting, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He looked both excited and exhausted. "Morning. Dr. Lewis," he said. "You're about to get busier. The United Nations just called." She smiled slightly. "That's never a casual call. They want you to keynote the Global Leadership Summit next month." He continued, "Theme integrity and power. They said your story fits." Amara walked toward her office, thinking, "I'm not sure I'm ready to stand on another stage." Marcus followed her. "You don't need to stand on it. Just speak from the same place you always do the truth." She set her bag down, turning to face him. "You think people are still listening? I think they've just started." Later that morning, she sat in a conference with the Synsense innovation team. Screens lit up around the room showing early results from the Empathy AI program developed with Aerostar. Airports in Atlanta, Dallas, and Seattle had begun pilot testing. The data was astonishing, a 35% increase in positive passenger interactions. Complaints dropped by nearly half. Amara's expression softened. "You see, technology doesn't have to replace humanity. It can remind us how to use it." The team smiled, proud. Across the city, at Aerostar headquarters, Gordon Hale was in a meeting of his own. This one wasn't about damage control. It was about rebuilding. He'd spent the past weeks restructuring internal systems, bringing in diversity consultants, rewriting training manuals. For the first time in years, his board meeting felt more like conversations than interrogations. He looked out the window toward the skyline, the same city where one silent act had forced an entire industry to confront itself. He whispered quietly, "Sometimes the strongest voices never raise themselves." Back at Synsense, Amara was reviewing a message that had just arrived in her inbox. It was from Janet Harlow. The subject line read, "Thank you." Amara hesitated, then opened it. "Dr. Lewis, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to try. I lost my job, but I gained something more important: clarity. I've been attending community classes about cultural awareness and empathy. My son's treatment is going well. Thanks to help I'll never understand, but will never forget. You didn't have to forgive me, but somehow you did. I'm trying to live worthy of that grace. Thank you for teaching me that kindness doesn't have to be loud to be strong." Amara stared at the words for a long time. Then she smiled, the kind of smile that comes from closure, not pride. She replied simply, "We all have the power to change. Janet, I'm glad you chose to." That evening, she went for a walk by the lakefront. The water shimmered under the fading sunlight. She passed joggers, families, and couples walking hand in hand. For the first time in months, she felt unseen again, and she realized she missed that. A child ran past her, chasing a kite. The wind caught it, pulling it high into the air. Amara watched as the little boy laughed, his mother cheering from a bench nearby. For a brief second, the world looked simple again. Her phone buzzed another message from Marcus. CNN wants an interview tonight. Prime time. You in, she typed back. No need. Let the silence keep speaking. She slipped the phone into her pocket and kept walking. Across social media, the tone was shifting. Comment sections once filled with anger now overflowed with personal confessions, stories from nurses, waiters, teachers, flight attendants. People shared their own moments of quiet resistance, moments where they'd chosen patience over fury, grace over pride. The silent power movement had become more than a trend. It had become a mirror. One post read, "I watched a man get disrespected at my job today. I didn't stay silent this time. I stood up." Maybe that's what she meant. Another said, "Dr. Lewis reminded us that respect shouldn't be a privilege. It should be the default." In her home office later that night, Amara read through some of these posts. Her eyes grew damp. She wasn't emotional often, but these messages weren't about her. They were about people finding their voices quietly, firmly, beautifully. She poured a glass of water and sat by the window again. The city glowed beneath her, its heartbeat steady. Somewhere above, a plane sliced through the night sky, lights blinking softly. She imagined all the passengers inside strangers, tired, hopeful, unaware that the world had just shifted a little toward compassion. A few days later, she finally agreed to one interview. It wasn't for TV or a major outlet. It was for a small podcast hosted by two college students who had reached out weeks ago. She liked their sincerity. They met in a modest studio downtown. The setup was simple. 2 microphones, 3 chairs, and a backdrop that read, "Voices of Change." When the recording started, one of the hosts asked, "Dr. Lewis, if you could tell the world one thing after all this, what would it be?" Amara smiled gently. That silence isn't the absence of strength. It's the presence of control. But don't mistake control for indifference. Sometimes, silence is just the breath before action. The other host leaned forward. "Do you think you've forgiven everyone involved?" She paused, thoughtful. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give to others. It's freedom you give to yourself. So yes, I've forgiven, but I've also remembered. The interview lasted only 20 minutes, but when it was uploaded, it spread like wildfire. Not because of the drama, there was none, but because of its truth. Her voice was calm, her words measured, and her message universal. People listened because it felt like she wasn't preaching. She was simply telling the truth out loud. By the end of the week, the movement had evolved. Nonprofits began adopting empathy. First initiatives in their communities. Corporations sent letters requesting consultation. High schools used her story in leadership programs. And through it all, Amara stayed grounded. She still walked to work some mornings. She still bought her own coffee. She still greeted the security guard by name. One night, as she left the office, Marcus caught up with her. "You know what's crazy? It all started because someone told you to stand in the wrong line." Amara smiled softly. "And maybe they weren't wrong. Maybe I just needed to draw a new line." Marcus laughed. "You think it's over." She looked up at the night sky, where planes glided silently through the clouds. "It's never over. Marcus, it's just quieter now." The two of them stood there for a moment, side by side, watching the blinking lights fade into the distance. The city hummed below them alive, imperfect, but somehow lighter. And as the wind swept through the streets, carrying the faint sounds of laughter and life, Amara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The kind of peace that doesn't shout, the kind that simply stays. The lights of New York shimmered below the plane as it began its descent. From her window seat, Dr. Amara Lewis could see the reflection of the skyline dancing across the glass, tall, brilliant, alive. The Global Leadership Summit was only hours away, and she was its most anticipated speaker. For weeks, she had tried to convince herself that she wasn't nervous, but now, staring down at the city that had built and broken so many dreams, she felt the familiar weight in her chest. This time, though, it wasn't fear. It was responsibility. When the plane landed, her assistant, Olivia Grant, was waiting at the gate, tablet in hand. "They've got reporters everywhere," Olivia said. "We'll go through the private exit. The UN teams arranged transport." Amara smiled faintly. "Feels like overkill." "Maybe," Olivia replied. "But you've become the story they can't stop telling." They drove through Manhattan as the morning sun painted the city gold. Billboards flashed news headlines and live feeds. "Global Summit opens today. Dr. Lewis to speak on integrity and power." Cameras followed the cars that approached the United Nations building, where banners waved in the breeze. Inside the green room, Amara stood before the mirror, adjusting her navy blazer. Her reflection was calm, poised, but her thoughts swirled like quiet currents beneath the surface. She wasn't here to relive the past. She was here to redefine it. Marcus entered, carrying a folder. "You ready for this, as ready as anyone can be when the world is listening," she said softly. He handed her a copy of her speech. "You could just read it," he offered. "Stick to the script." Amara looked at the pages for a long moment, then set them down. "No," she said. "If I came here to speak about integrity, I have to start with truth, not paper." When her name was announced, the applause filled the great hall. Delegates from across the world rose to their feet. She walked onto the stage slowly, the sound of the crowd fading until only the soft hum of the microphone remained. She took a breath and began. "Good morning. A few months ago, I stood in an airport line where someone decided I didn't belong. They looked at me and saw not who I was, but what they expected me to be. And I walked away, not out of pride, but out of peace." The audience was silent, every word hanging in the air like a truth they'd forgotten how to name. "I didn't speak that day," she continued, "but silence can be its own language. It can say, 'I see your judgment, and I refuse to carry it.' That moment taught me something simple but powerful. When you stop fighting for recognition, you start defining it." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Cameras flashed, capturing her calm expression. Her voice, steady and low, carried across the vast room. "I was raised by a woman who worked double shifts and still found time to teach me that dignity is not for sale. My mother used to say, 'Baby, when they can't hear your words, let them feel your silence.' She never imagined those words would travel this far. But here we are." The audience smiled softly. A few nodded. Some were already wiping tears. Amara's tone deepened. "I'm not here to tell you about discrimination or power or success. I'm here to tell you about humanity. Because the truth is, we don't lose our humanity in one big moment. We lose it little by little, every time we look away." She looked out at the sea of faces, world leaders, CEOs, activists, and continued, "What happened to me at that airport wasn't new. It was just visible. But for millions of people, that moment happens every day in boardrooms, schools, hospitals, and neighborhoods. It happens quietly, politely, sometimes even unintentionally. And yet, it still hurts the same." Her voice softened. "We don't fix that with policies. We fix it with presence, with the courage to see each other, even when it's uncomfortable. She glanced toward the back of the room, where Gordon Hale was seated. Their eyes met briefly. He gave a small, respectful nod. Amara continued, I stand here today not as a victim and not as a hero. I stand here as proof that change doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it looks like walking away instead of shouting back. And sometimes it looks like forgiveness, the hardest kind of strength. The audience erupted into applause. It wasn't thunderous or wild. It was steady, heartfelt, rising in waves that filled the hall. When the applause faded, Amara closed her speech with one final line. We all share the same sky. The question is, will we learn to share the same grace? The room stood as one. Cameras caught the moment her poised silhouette against the backdrop of a blue earth projected behind her. Afterward, in the lobby, reporters surrounded her. Questions flew from every direction. Dr. Lewis, how does it feel to become the symbol of silent power? What's next for Synsense? Do you believe forgiveness is enough? She smiled politely, but didn't answer. Instead, she simply said, listen to the message, not the messenger. That evening, she returned to her hotel overlooking the Hudson. The city below glowed like a living constellation. She removed her shoes, poured herself a cup of tea, and sat by the window. For the first time in weeks, she felt completely at peace. Her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Janet Harlow again. Just 3 words I watched today. Amara smiled and typed back. So did the world. Later that night, Marcus called. You did it, he said. The speech is everywhere. People are calling it a turning point. She looked out at the river, where reflections of bridges and lights moved slowly across the water. Maybe, she said softly, but turning points mean nothing if we stop turning. He chuckled. You never stop. Do you not when there's still work to do? After the call, she stayed at the window, listening to the soft hum of traffic below. Her reflection in the glass looked calm, grounded. Somewhere far away, a plane moved across the night sky. She followed its light until it disappeared beyond the horizon. Tomorrow, she would fly home, back to her team, her company, her life. But she knew nothing would ever be quite the same again, not for her, not for the people who had listened, and not for the ones who had finally started to see. Sometimes, change doesn't happen in a single act. Sometimes, it happens in the quiet spaces after, when the world finally sits down, breathes, and listens. And that, she thought, might just be the most powerful silence of all. The morning after the summit, New York felt different. The city was still loud, still restless, but beneath the noise there was a hum like a collective heartbeat. Dr. Amara Lewis sat in the back seat of a black car, her eyes following the blur of passing buildings. Her phone kept buzzing, but she didn't check it. For once, she wanted to feel the world instead of reading it through a screen. Oh, outside! Digital billboards lit up Times Square. One of them showed her face next to a quote from her speech. We all share the same sky. Another displayed the words Charkan Silent Power Movement in bold white letters. She exhaled softly. She hadn't created a brand. She had sparked a reflection. When the car reached LaGuardia Airport, Marcus was already waiting near the private terminal. He held 2 coffees and that familiar look of both awe and exhaustion. You broke the internet again, he said with a grin. Amara smiled. Let's hope I didn't break humanity while I was at it. He handed her the coffee. Social media's on fire. Students, teachers, even police departments are quoting your speech. A senator just proposed a Grace in Leadership education initiative, and CNN called it the speech that healed a wound. She looked down at the steaming cup in her hands. Healing isn't a headline. Marcus, it's a process. He nodded. Still, not a bad start. The flight back to Chicago was quiet. She sat by the window, watching the clouds drift below, thinking about the journey that had brought her here from that single, humiliating moment in an airport line to standing before the world speaking about grace. Life, she thought, had a way of turning pain into poetry if you let it. When the plane landed, her driver was waiting. The Chicago skyline greeted her like an old friend, strong and familiar. As they drove past the Synsense tower, she noticed a group of young employees gathered outside, holding handmade signs that read, "Empathy is power and thank you, Dr. Lewis." They weren't protesting. They were celebrating. She waved from the car window. Their faces lit up. That simple exchange, that small connection filled her heart more than any award could. Inside the building, the mood was electric. Olivia met her in the lobby. "Welcome back, Dr. Lewis. We've got a situation, a good one." Amara raised an eyebrow. "Those are rare." Olivia smiled. "The White House called. The First Lady wants to meet. She's launching a national empathy program for youth, and she wants Synsense to partner." Amara blinked. "That's unexpected." She said your story reminded her of something her grandmother used to say, "Respect isn't taught, it's mirrored." Amara stood still for a moment, absorbing the words. "Then let's make sure we build a mirror that never cracks." That afternoon, she walked through the Synsense Innovation Lab, where engineers were testing the first version of their empathy module. It simulated passenger interactions using virtual reality, showing users how unconscious bias affected tone, posture, and decisions. Watching the demonstration, she felt something shift inside her, a sense of purpose deeper than pride. "Technology can't feel," she said softly to Marcus, who stood beside her, "but it can teach us how to remember that we do." He nodded. "You've turned software into soulware." She laughed gently. "I'll let you trademark that." By evening, the office had emptied. Amara stayed behind, her desk lamp casting a warm glow across the room. She opened her laptop and began writing. Not another press release, not a statement, just a letter addressed to no one in particular, yet somehow to everyone. "The day they told me to move to another line, I thought I was walking away. But now I see I was walking towards something, a conversation, a mirror, a reminder. We don't need louder voices. We need kinder ones. We don't need more speeches. We need more silence that listens. Change begins when humility outshines ego." She saved it as the Ripple letter. When she closed her laptop, she noticed the faint sound of rain tapping against the windows. She stood and walked over to watch the droplets streak down the glass. The city lights blurred beneath them, soft and golden. In that moment, she felt profoundly small and yet somehow infinite. The next day, the letter was posted on the Synsense blog. Within hours, it spread across the internet. People shared it, quoted it, printed it. Teachers read it aloud in classrooms. Churches wove it into sermons. Corporate leaders posted it with captions like the reminder we all needed. And just like that, the Ripple letter became the heartbeat of a movement that refused to fade. Weeks passed. The storm of attention slowly gave way to something gentler understanding. Aerostar's Equal Skies initiative had expanded to other industries. Banks, schools, and even government offices began adapting versions of Synsense's empathy model. At a press event, Gordon Hale spoke publicly for the first time since the scandal. Dr. Lewis taught us that silence isn't surrender, it's strength. Her grace didn't just change our airline, it changed how we see leadership. When Amara saw the clip later, she smiled quietly. Gordon had changed too. The system was learning, one person at a time. That evening, as she prepared to leave the office, she found Marcus waiting by the door. He was holding a small plaque wrapped in paper. "We had this made," he said, handing it to her. She unwrapped it. The plaque read, "For the woman who spoke without speaking and made the world listen." Amara laughed softly. "You didn't have to." Marcus smiled. "We did, because sometimes silence deserves a standing ovation." She placed the plaque on her desk, beside the bonsai tree that had grown taller since this all began. Its tiny leaves glowed under the lamplight. She whispered, "Mama, you'd like this." As the night deepened, she walked out to the terrace overlooking the city. The wind was cool, carrying the scent of rain and concrete. Far below, the streets were alive, people moving, lights flashing, stories unfolding. She thought about all the names she'd heard in letters and messages, people from places she'd never been, each touched in some way by her silence. It was humbling. It was healing. The world hadn't become perfect. Bias still lived. Inequality still lingered. But something had undeniably shifted. People were listening differently now. Slower. Softer. She closed her eyes, letting the wind brush her face. For a moment, she imagined her mother beside her again, whispering the words she'd carried her entire life. "Baby, the sky doesn't care who you are. It only knows how high you're willing to rise." Amara opened her eyes and looked out at the horizon. Somewhere up there, another plane was taking off carrying strangers, stories, possibilities. And she smiled, knowing that even if they never knew her name, they were flying through a sky she helped make a little kinder. The morning train from Chicago slid quietly through the plains of Georgia. Outside, fields rolled by in soft waves of green and gold. Amara Lewis sat by the window, her reflection framed against the glass, a faint smile on her lips. After months of speeches, cameras, and conferences, she was finally going home. South Atlanta hadn't changed much. The same cracked sidewalks, the same corner store with the faded red sign, the same oak tree near the church that seemed to have been standing since time began. As the taxi turned onto the narrow street where she'd grown up, the weight of memory pressed gently against her heart. The small brick house at the end of the block looked exactly as she remembered. The paint on the porch railings had peeled, and the mailbox leaned a little, but it still felt alive, like it had been waiting for her. She stepped out of the car and stood there for a moment, just breathing in the air of her childhood. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and old books. Her cousin Lydia had been keeping it up since her mother passed. Lydia appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up with joy. "Lord, look at you," she said, hugging Amara tight. "Big-time CEO coming home like she never left." Amara laughed softly. "I never really did." They spent the afternoon catching up at the kitchen table, the same one where her mother used to serve Sunday dinner. Lydia poured sweet tea while Amara told her stories of the summit, the new initiatives, the whirlwind of change that had followed. "You always had that spark," Lydia said. Aunt Clara used to say, "My baby don't need to shout to be heard." Guess she was right. Amara looked toward the framed photo on the counter, her mother in her nurse's uniform, smiling proudly. She was right about everything. She whispered, "Later." Amara walked alone to the community center down the street. It had once been a worn-down hall where kids played basketball and volunteers held tutoring sessions. Now it was newly painted, its front sign reading Lewis Learning Center. The letters made her pause. Inside, she found a group of teenagers gathered in a circle, listening to a young teacher. When they saw her, whispers rippled through the room. One girl finally spoke. "Are you Dr. Lewis? The lady from the airport video?" Amara smiled. "I guess so." The girl stood, clutching a notebook. "I watched your speech for my civics class. You made me want to do something with my life. Not just talk about change, make it." Amara's chest tightened. "That's the best thing I've heard all year." The teacher approached her afterward. "Thank you for funding this center. You didn't have to, but you did. These kids needed a place like this." Amara nodded. "I needed it too. Once." As she left, the late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the street. Children rode bikes past her, laughing. The air filled with the smell of rain on hot pavement. It felt like the past and present had finally learned how to exist in the same breath. That night, she sat on the porch where she used to study under a dim light. Fireflies floated in the yard like sparks of memory. She closed her eyes and listened to the hum of crickets and far-off trains. For the first time in months, she wasn't Dr. Lewis, the CEO or the speaker. She was just Amara, the daughter of a woman who believed silence could be powerful. Marcus called. "You disappeared again," he said with a laugh. "Just visiting home." She replied, "Needed to remember who I was before the noise." "You deserve it. But you should know. There's talk about nominating you for the National Leadership Award." She chuckled softly. "I didn't do any of this for an award." "Marcus, I know. That's why you'll probably get it. After the call." She leaned back in the chair, the wood creaking softly beneath her. The stars were bright tonight. Somewhere out there, planes were crossing the sky, carrying strangers and second chances. The next morning, she visited the local radio station. It was small, a single room with old equipment and faded posters on the walls. The host, Mrs. Evelyn Parker, had invited her to share a few words with the community. When the red light blinked on, Evelyn smiled. "Dr. Lewis, everyone's proud of you. What's the one thing you'd like to tell the people back home?" Amara looked through the glass window at the town beyond its streets. Its people, its memories. Her voice was soft but sure. "I'd tell them that silence isn't where the story ends. It's where it begins. Sometimes you walk away not to escape, but to lead others somewhere better." Evelyn nodded, eyes glistening. "That's beautiful." When the interview ended, people began calling the station old neighbors, former teachers, friends from church. Some cried. Some simply said, "Tell her thank you." That evening, Lydia found her on the porch again. "You've been quiet since the interview." Amara smiled faintly. "Just thinking. Mama used to dream about changing the world. I think she'd laugh if she knew it started with an airport line." Lydia laughed too. She'd say, "Baby, God works in lines and circles both." The two women sat there together as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sky turning shades of purple and gold. A soft breeze rustled the trees, carrying the scent of magnolia and memory. Before going to bed, Amara opened her journal, the same one she had carried through every stage of her journey. She wrote, "Coming home reminds me that success isn't measured by noise, but by nurture. Every movement must eventually return to where it began to feed the roots that made it possible. Mama, this silence you taught me has found its voice." She closed the book and placed it on the nightstand beside her mother's photo. In the stillness of that small room, she realized something she'd never said out loud, that all along, she hadn't been trying to teach the world to listen to her. She'd been trying to teach it to listen to itself. The next morning, before dawn, she stepped outside one last time. The street was quiet, the world still half asleep. She looked up at the pale light of morning breaking across the sky and whispered, "Thank you, Mama. We did it." As she turned to go, a plane passed overhead, its faint roar blending into the waking sounds of the city. It felt like a benediction, a promise that no act of grace ever truly ends. A year later, the world felt different, not louder, just clearer. The sun was rising over Chicago, painting the skyline in streaks of gold and rose. Inside a quiet conference room at Synsense headquarters, a small group of journalists waited as Dr. Amara Lewis prepared to step onto the stage. It wasn't a press conference, it was a farewell. The board had just accepted her decision to step down as CEO. It wasn't a resignation born of defeat, but of peace. She had done what she came to do. Now it was time to let the next chapter write itself. As the cameras rolled, Amara stood before the microphone, her hands folded calmly in front of her. "Good morning," she began, her voice as steady as ever. "A year ago, I stood on a different stage and spoke about integrity and power. I didn't know those words would travel as far as they did. But what I've learned since is this movements aren't built from moments. They're built from people who choose to keep believing in them when the cameras turn away." She smiled softly. Synsense was never just a company. It was an idea that technology could make us more human, not less. That empathy can be coded, not because machines need it, but because people forget it. The audience listened in silence, many recording, some just absorbing her calm strength. "I'm stepping down today not to walk away, but to make room for new voices. Silence taught me that sometimes leadership means knowing when to stop speaking." Her final words drew a standing ovation. When she left the stage, Marcus was waiting backstage, eyes glistening. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. Amara smiled. "I've been ready for a long time. I just didn't know it." They walked together through the corridor, past walls lined with photographs, employees, community events, the launch of the Empathy AI. Each image was a memory carved in time. Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Reporters shouted questions, but she didn't stop. She waved once, stepped into her car, and left quietly, the same way she had once walked away from that airport line. Later that afternoon, she arrived at the Lewis Learning Center in Atlanta. The building had grown since her last visit. A new wing was under construction, funded by donations from across the country. The sign out front read, "The SilentPower Foundation." Children played in the courtyard, their laughter echoing through the air. A mural painted along the side of the building showed her mother's face beside the words, "Grace is louder than pride." Inside, Lydia met her with a warm hug. "You're early," she said. Amara grinned. "I'm retired now. I can afford to be." They laughed together, then walked down the hallway where local artists had displayed paintings inspired by Amara's story. A woman standing tall in an airport, a sea of faces turning to watch her, a single light cutting through the crowd. "Feels strange, seeing yourself like that," Lydia said. Amara nodded. Strange and humbling. They entered a small classroom where a group of high school students were preparing for a debate on ethical leadership. The teacher spotted her and smiled. "Everyone, we have a special guest today." Gas filled the room as Amara walked in. One boy stood up and said, "You're the reason I joined this program. I used to think leadership was about talking the loudest. Now I know it's about listening the longest." Amara felt a lump rise in her throat. "That's the best definition I've ever heard," she said. After the session, she spent time with the students, asking about their dreams, their challenges, their hopes. Each story reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. That evening, she walked alone to the park near her childhood home. The air was thick with the scent of rain and blooming jasmine. Children were playing, parents chatting on benches. Life ordinary and extraordinary all at once. She sat under the same oak tree that had once shaded her mother's lunch breaks. Pulling out her notebook, she wrote, "The silence that once felt heavy now feels full. It carries voices I'll never meet, stories I'll never hear. But somehow I know them, because they know me." She paused, looking up at the sky. The sound of an airplane drifted faintly above, steady, familiar, unremarkable, and yet it still made her smile. A little girl with pigtails ran up to her. "Are you Miss Amara?" "Yes, sweetheart. My mama says you're the lady who made people nicer." Amara laughed gently. "I think your mama might be giving me too much credit." The girl shrugged. "She said you're the reason she got a better job at the airport. They said they changed things." Amara's eyes softened. "Then maybe we both helped." "Huh?" The child nodded, satisfied, then ran back to join her friends. As the sky darkened, Lydia joined her on the bench with 2 cups of tea. "You ever think about what's next?" Amara smiled. "Maybe I'll write, maybe I'll teach, or maybe I'll just sit here for a while." Lydia chuckled. "You sit still, I'll believe it when I see it." They both laughed. Later that night, Amara returned home and turned on the television. A documentary was airing, The Silent Gesture, the story of Dr. Amara Lewis. She watched quietly as the screen filled with images from that day at the airport, her speech at the UN, and the programs that had followed. The narrator's voice said, "In an age of noise, one woman reminded the world that true power doesn't shout, it listens." Amara turned off the TV and sat in silence for a while. Outside, the rain began to fall, soft and rhythmic. She could almost hear her mother's voice in it. Before bed, she opened her notebook one last time and wrote, "Every journey ends with silence, not the silence of absence, but of arrival. If my story means anything, let it mean this, that kindness is not weakness, and grace is not surrender. They are the quiet engines that move the world forward." She closed the notebook and set it beside her mother's framed photo. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window. Amara stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air. Across the street, the learning center's doors opened and children poured out, laughing and chasing one another. She smiled. The world was still imperfect, still noisy, still learning. But somewhere in that chaos, a little more empathy lived than before. As she turned to go inside, a plane flew overhead, cutting through the blue sky quiet, steady, beautiful. Amara looked up, her lips curving into a peaceful smile. "Still flying," she whispered, and with that, she closed the door behind her. Dr. Amara Lewis's story is not only about discrimination, but also about the power of calm and tolerance. In today's noisy world, where everyone is trying to speak loudly to be heard, she chose to remain silent, but her silence resonates louder than any voice. A lesson we can take with us, especially those who are halfway through life, is that dignity does not need to be proven by words. Sometimes, How we respond to injustice teaches the world who we are. Forgiveness is not weakness, but the highest form of strength when we are calm enough to not retaliate, but choose to heal. Dr. Amara not only protects her dignity, but also opens a door where people can look at each other with understanding instead of judgment. It is a gift of silence, of kindness, of the belief that no matter how harsh the world is, we still have the right to choose a humane response. Thank you for listening to this story. If you feel it touches your heart, please like, share, and subscribe so we can spread stories of healing one story at a time.